Welcome to Preeminent Test Prep. Today I'll be taking you through the reading section of SAT Practice Test 5. I'll be giving you answer explanations for each question as well as tips, tricks, and insights into how to approach the SAT reading section. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to go through each passage. I'll read through the passage, then I'll go through the questions and give answer explanations, tips, and tricks. So let's go ahead and get started with passage 1. So I'm going to go ahead and read the passage. The passage is adopted from William Maxwell, The Folded Leaf, copyright 1959 by William Maxwell, originally published in 1945. The Alcazar restaurant was on Sheridan Road, near Devon Avenue. It was long and narrow, with tables for two along the walls and tables for four down the middle. The decoration was art modern, except for the series of murals depicting the four seasons and the sick ferns in the front window. Limey sat down at the second table from the cash register and ordered his dinner. The history book which he propped against the catsup in the glass sugar bowl had been used by others before him. Blank pages front and back were filled with maps, drawings, dates, comic cartoons, and organs of the body, also with names and messages no longer clear and never absolutely legible. On nearly every other page there was some marginal notation, either in ink or in very hard pencil, and unless someone had upset a glass of water, the marks on page 177 were from tears. While Limey read about the Peace of Paris, signed on the 13th of May, 1814, between France and the Allied powers, his right hand managed again and again to bring food up to his mouth. Sometimes he chewed, sometimes he swallowed whole the food that he had no idea he was eating. The Congress of Vienna met with some allowance for delays. Early in November of the same year, and all the powers engaged in the war on either side sent plenipotentiaries. It was by far the most splendid and important assembly ever convoked to discuss and determine the affairs of Europe. The Emperor of Russia, the King of Prussia, the Kings of Bavaria, Denmark, and Württemberg, all were present in person at the court of the Emperor Francis I in the Austrian capital. When Limey put down his fork and began to count them off one by one on the fingers of his left hand, the waitress, whose name was Irma, thought he was through eating and tried to take his plate away. He stopped her. Prince Metternich, his right thumb, presided over the Congress, and Prince Talleyrand, the index finger, represented France. A party of four, 2 men and 2 women, came into the restaurant, all talking at once, and took possession of the center table nearest Limey. The woman had shingled hair and short, tight skirts, which exposed the underside of her knees when she sat down. One of the women had the face of a young boy, but disguised by one trick or another, lipstick, powder, wet bangs plastered against the high forehead, and a pair of long pendant earrings, to look like a woman of 35, which as a matter of fact she was. The men were older. They laughed more than there seemed any occasion for while they were deciding between soup and shrimp cocktail, and their laughter was too loud. But it was the women's voices, the terrible, not quite sober pitch of the women's voices, which caused Limey to skim over 2 whole pages without realizing what was on them. Fortunately, he realized this and went back, otherwise he might have never known about the secret treaty concluded between England, France, and Austria, when the pretensions of Prussia and Russia, acting in concert, seemed to threaten the renewal of attack. The results of the Congress were stated clearly at the bottom of page 67 and at the top of page 68, but before Limey got halfway through them, a coat that he recognized as his father's hung on the hook next to his chair. Limey closed the book and said, "I didn't think you were coming." Time is probably no more unkind to sporting characters than it is to other people, but physical decay unsustained by respectability is somehow more noticeable. Mr. Peters' hair was turning gray, and his scalp showed through on top. He had lost weight also. He had no longer filled out his clothes the way he used to. His color was poor, and the flower had disappeared from his buttonhole. In its place was an American Legion button. Apparently he himself was not aware that there had been any change. He threatened his ties self-consciously, and when Irma handed him a menu, he gestured with it so that the 2 women at the next table would notice the diamond ring on the 4th finger of his right hand. Both of these things, and also the fact that his hands showed signs of the manicurist, one can blame on the young man who had taken his picture with a derby hat on the back of his head, and also sitting with a girl in the curve of the moon. The young man had never for 1 second deserted Mr. Peters. He was always there tugging at Mr. Peters' elbow, making him do things that were not becoming in a man of 45. Alright, over the course of the passage, the primary focus shifts from what to what. Well, in the beginning, we talk about Limey reading this book inside of this restaurant, so we're really focusing in on Limey and his experience with the book. And then as we move on, we talk about descriptions of people in the restaurant. So we're talking about the woman, the 2 men, what they're doing, their obnoxious laughter. Then we start talking about his father that comes into the restaurant. So we're really focusing in on Limey's experience in reading a book and then moving into the descriptions of the people in the restaurant. Now, if we look at answer choice A, it is wrong because it says Limey's inner thoughts to observations made by the other characters. The observations aren't made by other characters, they are made by Limey. So we can get rid of A. B, an exchange between strangers. There's really no exchange between strangers there. right? That would be like an exchange between Limey and the strangers, but that never occurs, so we can get rid of B. C, the physical setting of the scene to the different characters' personality traits. We don't really discuss their personality traits, so that is incorrect as well. Also, that doesn't really talk about Limey at all, and Limey is a part of the passage, right? So now we've got number 2, the main purpose of the first paragraph is to what? Well, if we go back to our first paragraph, we see that we talk about the restaurant, the setting of the restaurant, and then we shift down into Limey's experience with his book. So the main purpose of that first paragraph then is going to be to really convey that setting, because we talk about the setting of the restaurant, the tables, where they're set up, and then we do that by describing the place and the object. So we have the 2 chairs are along the outskirts of the restaurant, and we have 4 chair or more chair setups in the middle, and we're really conveying the setting of that restaurant. A is incorrect because we have introduced the passage's main character by showing his nightly habits. We don't know if he does this every night, so we can get rid of A. We have B, indicate the date of the passage takes place. We don't really indicate the date it takes place. By presenting period details, we don't do that. D, foreshadow an event that is described. We are not foreshadowing an event that is described in detail later in the passage. So we can get rid of D as well. Number 3, it can be reasonably inferred that Irma the waitress thinks Limey is through eating because he is no longer holding his fork, right? It says that he puts his fork down, and I'll go ahead and show you where that is about. We've got that. Let's see. I believe that it is, can't find where it was at, but we've got, here it is right here. When Limey put down his fork and began to count them off one by one on the fingers of his hand, the waitress, whose name was Irma, thought he was through eating and tried to take his plate. So because he puts his fork down is why she thought he was through eating. Therefore, our answer there is going to be C, he's no longer holding his fork. It doesn't say his plate's empty. It doesn't say he began reading his book. In fact, he was counting on his fingers, so he wasn't reading his book. He has asked her to clear the table. He never did that either. Number 4, Limey's primary impression of the party of 4 is that they, A, are noisy and distracting, right? We talk about how they're noisy and distracting, and we're asked for evidence, right? Our evidence for that one. They're noisy and distracting, and I believe that it's about lines right here, right? It says, the woman's voices, the terrible, not quite sober pitch of the woman's voices caused Limey to skim over 2 whole pages without knowing what was on them. That shows it's distracting because he's skipping pages, and it shows that they're loud because we're talking about the annoying, loud, pitched voices. So our answer there is going to be in lines, where is 5? Lines 55 to 59. So that's going to be C for number 5. All right, now we got number 6. The narrator indicates that Limey finally closes the history book because his father joined him at the table, right? We have his father comes in to the room and sits at the table with him. So that'll be A there. The primary impression created by the narrator's description of Mr. Peters is that he is, we can go ahead and go to lines 74 to 79 to support our answer, but we remember that it talks about him being old, turning gray. His scalp showed through on top, so he's old, lost weight, no longer fills his clothes the way he used to. His color's poor, so he's really old and aging. He's aging and he is shriveling, right? So aging and shriveled will be our answer there. That'll be D. He's not nervous and hesitant. He's just old. He's not angry, and he's not healthy and fit because he's old and shriveling. All right, question 8. The main idea of the last paragraph is that Mr. Peters what? Well, in the last period, or the last paragraph, we're really talking about how Mr. Peters, he's behaving as if he's a version of his younger self, right? And the evidence for that, if you were to look at this, if the next question is evidence, which I don't think it is, but it would be right down here, tugging at the, he was always there tugging at Mr. Peters' elbow, making him do things that were not becoming in a man of 45. So this not becoming in a man of 45 means that it's not like something a man who is 45 would do, right? He's making him do things that would be much younger, right? Associated with a younger man. So he behaves as if he's a younger version of himself there. We don't say that he neglects to spend time with family, so we can get rid of that. He's conscious of symbols of wealth and power. We don't talk about wealth and power. And is preoccupied with the knowledge he's getting old. In fact, it's the opposite of that. He's behaving as if he's young. So we can select B as our answer there. Question 9. Which choice best supports the conclusion Mr. Peters wants to attract attention? Well, that is going to be back where we talk about him flashing his ring at the waitresses. So that is going to be in lines 81, I believe, right here. Yep. He straightened his tie self-consciously, and when Irma handed him a menu, he gestured it so that the 2 women at the next table would notice the diamond ring on the forefinger of his right hand. Right? So we're really talking about how his he's making these gestures to these women so he can gain attention so that they see that he's married. So that's 81 to 85, and that's showing that he wants attention. So that's going to be line choice B is 81 to 85, so that will be our answer there for him attracting attention. All right, question 10, as used in line 93, becoming most nearly means, well, we kind of talked about this already, but when we say making him do things that were not becoming of a man of 45, we're really talking about things that aren't fit of a man of 45, right? Things that a younger man would do, so they aren't fitting of a man of 45 should be our answer there. Right? It's not that they aren't emerging, not that they're not developing or happening, they're just not fitting of a man of 45 because they're fitting of a man younger. So 10, our answer there will be B, and we can move on to passage 2 now. All right, let's get into passage 2. So questions 11 to 21 are based on this following passage. Passage 1 is adopted from Catherine Beecher, Essay on Slavery and Abolitionism, originally published in 1837. So I'm going to read passage 1, answer the questions on passage 1, then I'll switch over to passage 2, answer questions on passage 2, and then answer the questions that ask about both of them. All right, so passage 1, heaven has appointed to one sex the superior and to the other the subordinate station, and this is without reference to the character or conduct of either. It is therefore as much for the dignity as it is for the interest of females in all respects to conform to the duties of this relation. But while women hold a subordinate relation in society to the other sex, it is not because it was designed that her duties or influence should be any less important or all-pervading, but it was designed that the mode of gaining influence and of exercising power should be altogether different and peculiar. A man may act on society by the collision of intellect. In public debate, he may purge his measures by a sense of shame, by fear and by personal interest. He may coerce by the combination of public sentiment. He may drive by physical force, and he has not outstepped the boundaries of his sphere. But all the power and all the conquests that are lawful to women are those only to which appeal to the kindly, generous, peaceful, and benevolent principles. Woman is to win everything by peace and love, by making herself so much respected, esteemed, and loved that to yield to her opinions to gratify her wishes will be the free will offering of the heart. But this is to be all accomplished in the domestic and social circle. There let every woman become so cultivated and refined in intellect that her taste and judgment will be respected, so benevolent in feeling and action that her motives will be reverenced, so unassuming and unambitious that collision and competition will be banished, so gentle and easy to be entreated as that every heart will repose in her presence. Then the fathers, the husbands, and the sons will find an influence thrown around them to which they will yield not only willingly but proudly. A woman may seek the aid of cooperation and combination among her own sex to assist her in her appropriate offices of piety, charity, maternal, and domestic duty, but whatever in any measure throws a woman into the attitude of a combatant, either for herself or for others, whatever binds her in a party conflict, whatever obliges her in any way to exert coercive influences, throws her out of her appropriate sphere. If these general principles are correct, they are entirely opposed to the plan of arraying females in any abolition movement. All right, in passage 1, Beecher makes which point about the status of women relative to that of men? Well, she says, and if we go back and we find our answer, it's going to be in lines 6 through 10. We actually see that she says, well, women hold a subordinate relation in society to the other sex, so she's saying that they are inferior to men. It is not because it was designated her duties or her influence should be any less important or all-pervading. So basically what she's saying there is she's saying that A, women are inferior to men, so that part's correct, but women are playing a significant role in society, right? As significant as that as men, it's just different, right? And it's inferior in the sense as far as society is considering it at that time in history. So B is going to be our correct answer there, right? A, women depend on men for their safety and security. She isn't making that argument, so A is incorrect. B, women have fewer rights than men do, but women have less responsibilities. She isn't making the argument they have less responsibilities. And D, women are superior to men. She isn't making that argument. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer? We already said that one, lines 6 through 10. 13, in passage 1, Beecher implies that women's effect on public life is largely what? Well, she's saying that it's really largely, basically it's largely indirect, I do believe, right? She's talking about how it's an effect that they have on society that stems from the home and social circle, right? So the home and family life, that's where they're exerting their influence on. So basically what we can do to support that, if I was going to support that, was evidence. She talks about how let every woman be accomplished in the domestic and social circle. She's really saying that by doing this, that's where women have their influence. So our answer for 13 is going to be B. All right. We can say that, I'll go ahead and show you why the other ones for 13 are incorrect real quick. Women's effect on public life is largely overlooked. She doesn't make that argument because few men are interested in women's thoughts about politics. She doesn't say that. She actually says that they are interested in it, but just in the home and social circles. And then C, unnecessary. No, she's making the claim that it is necessary just in the social circle at home. And then symbolic, no, she's not making the claim that it's symbolic, so we can get rid of D as well. 14 as used in line 2, station most nearly means. Well, let's go look at line 2 and come up with our own answer. So we've got heaven has appointed to one sex the superior and to the other the subordinate station. Okay, so it's saying that one sex is superior, the other is inferior. So in that case, we're really talking about rank, right? So we'll be talking about rank there. So our answer should be D, rank, because we're talking about one is above the other. So that's rank, not region, because that would be talking about area, not studio, and not district. All right, now we've got 15. As used in line 12, peculiar most nearly means what? We have, but it was designed that the mode of gaining influence and of exercising power should be altogether different and peculiar. So altogether different and peculiar. Peculiar here is really meaning distinctive, right? So the answer for 15 should be C, because we're really talking about how it's peculiar and it's distinctive. It's different. It's different than the males. It's distinctive from the male's role in society. We're not saying that it's eccentric or surprising or infrequent. Right? These two are basically, if you were to just try to pick a synonym, you'd get it wrong because you're not using context, and infrequent is really kind of unrelated here. That's talking about timing, and we're not really talking about timing. All right, now we've got questions 16. I see that question 16 is referring me back to, question 16 is referring me back to passage 2, so I'll go ahead and read that one. So passage 2, it says, is adapted from Angelina E. Grimke, Letters to Catherine Beecher, originally published in 1838. Grimke encouraged Southern women to oppose slavery publicly, and passage 2, it says, is Grimke's response to Beecher. And passage 1 was Beecher's response to Grimke. So passage 2, the investigation of the rights of the slave has led me to a better understanding of my own. I have found the anti-slavery cause to be the high school of morals in our land, the school in which human rights are more fully investigated and are better understood and taught than in any other. Here a great fundamental principle is uplifted and illuminated, and from this central light rays and numerals stream all around. Human beings have rights because they are moral beings. The rights of all men grow out of the moral nature, and as all men have the same moral nature, they have essentially the same rights. These rights may be wrested from the slave, but they cannot be alienated. His title to himself is as perfect now as is that of Lyman Beecher. It is stamped on his moral being and is like that imperishable. Now, if rights are founded in the nature of our moral being, then the mere circumstance of sex does not give to man higher rights and responsibilities than to women. To suppose that it does would be to deny the self-evident truth that the physical constitution is the mere instrument of the moral nature. To suppose that it does would be to break up utterly the relations of the two natures and to reverse their functions, exalting the animal nature into a monarch and humbling the moral into a slave, making the former a proprietor and the latter its property. When human beings are regarded as moral beings, sex, instead of being enthroned upon the summit, administering upon rights and responsibilities, sinks into insignificance and nothingness. My doctrine, then, is that whatever it is morally right for man to do, it is morally right for woman to do. Our duties originate not from differences in sex, but from the diversity of our relations in life, the various gifts and talents committed to our care, and the different eras in which we live. All right, so what's Grimke's central claim there? Well, her central claim is that race and gender are not determining the rights of individuals. All right, so our answer there is going to be A. She talks about how just like race doesn't determine the rights of an individual, neither does gender. So she's really countering what the passage 1 was saying. She doesn't say men and women must work together to improve society. She doesn't say moral rights are most important distinction between human beings and animals. That's not even close. D, men and women should have equal opportunities to flourish. That also is not really her argument. We're not really talking about opportunity here. We're talking about rights, right? Rights for individuals being based on race and gender. That's our central argument. Passage 2, Grimke makes which point about human rights? Well, the point that she's really making about human rights in this passage particularly is that they hold their moral authority regardless of whether they are considered by law, and I'll show you the evidence for that one as well. See, if we were to go up into lines 61 through 65, let's go ahead and find where that is. Right here, she says these rights may be wrested from the slave, but they cannot be alienated. So while these rights may not be granted legally to the slave, they cannot be taken away, right? They will always be there. So these rights, even if they're not protected by law, they're always going to be there, right? So it is stamped on his moral being, and like that, it is imperishable. Imperishable meaning even if the law doesn't recognize it, those rights are still there. All right, so we go down. Our answer there is going to be 61 to 65. So 18 is going to be answer choice B. And that also shows us how they retain their moral authority regardless of whether they are recognized by law. All right, we've got question 19. Which choice best states the relationship between the two passages? All right, well, passage 1 is really taking, really they're contrasting passages, right? They're combating each other. So we're really looking for an answer choice here that's talking about how the two are combating each other, right? So if we think about passage 2, passage 2 is taking issue with that primary argument of passage 1, right? Passage 1's argument is that men and women need to occupy different spheres, and their differences make it so that they need to do different things, whereas passage 2 says, no, they can do the same things, they don't have to occupy different spheres, just like race and gender don't determine the rights that one has, they don't determine the spheres that they should occupy, right? So passage 2 takes an issue with passage 1, right? Passage 2 was really responding to Beecher. So then we have A is going to be incorrect because it says passage 2 illustrates the practical difficulties of a proposal, and that isn't true. We're not illustrating the difficulties of that proposal in passage 1. Question C, or answer choice C, passage 2 provides historical context for the perspective offered in passage 1. We aren't offering context for passage 1, we're really arguing against it, we're taking an issue with it. D, passage 2 elaborates upon several ideas implied in passage 1. While A, the ideas weren't implied, they were explicitly stated, and we're not elaborating on them, we are taking issue with them, right? So taking issue there is more accurate. All right, next up we've got question 20. So question 20, we say, based on the passages, both authors would agree with which of the following claims. All right, well, what really they're going to both agree on here is they're both going to agree that women have moral duties and responsibilities. They just disagree on how those moral duties and responsibilities should be carried out, with passage 1 thinking that those duties should be carried out through the home, and passage 2 saying those responsibilities and moral duties should be carried out wherever, just like a man would carry them out. B, men often work selflessly for political change. Neither one really addresses that. C, the ethical obligations of women are often undervalued. No, we're not really talking about how they're valued in society. D, political activism is as important for women as it is for men. Not both passages are making that argument, right? Really, that one's just passage 2 is really the only one that's making that argument. All right, Beecher would most likely have reacted to lines 65 to 68 of passage 2 with what? Well, let's go take a look at what 65 to 68 say. So 65 says, now if rights are founded in the nature of our moral being, then the mere circumstance of sex does not give to man higher rights and responsibilities than to women. Well, the author of passage 1 would disagree with that. She would say that because men and women are different, they automatically have different responsibilities. Right, so that's going to be disagreement. So our answer for 21 there is going to be D. She's going to respond with disagreement because she feels the natures of men and women are fundamentally different. She won't react with agreement, obviously. Sympathy, also, obviously, she won't react with that. Dismay, because she feels women actually have a more difficult role. She never says that she feels that they would have a more difficult role. She just says that she feels they have a different role. All right, so that takes us through passage 2. Now we can go ahead and get started with passage 3. All right, let's get started with passage 3. This passage is adopted from Brian Walsh, and it's titled "The Whole Food Blues: Why Organic Agriculture May Not Be Sustainable." Copyright 2012 by Time Inc. When it comes to energy, everyone loves efficiency. Cutting energy waste is one of those goals that both sides of the political divide can agree on, even if they sometimes diverge on how best to get there. Energy efficiency allows us to get more out of our given resources, which is good for the economy and mostly good for the environment as well. In an increasingly hot and crowded world, the only sustainable way to live is to get way more out of less. Every environmentalist would agree, but change the conversation to food and suddenly efficiency doesn't look so good. Conventional industrial agriculture has become incredibly efficient on a simple land-to-food basis. Thanks to fertilizers, mechanization, and irrigation, each American farmer feeds over 155 people worldwide. Conventional farming gets more and more crop per square foot of cultivated land. Over 170 bushels of corn per acre in Iowa, for example, which can mean less territory needs to be converted from wilderness to farmland. And since a third of the planet is already used for agriculture, destroying forests and other wild habitats along the way, anything that could help us produce more food on less land would seem to be good for the environment. Of course, that's not how most environmentalists regard their arugula, a leafy green. They have embraced organic food as better for the planet and healthier and tastier too than the stuff produced by our agricultural corporations. Environmentalists disdain the enormous amounts of energy needed and waste created by conventional farming, while organic practices foregoing artificial fertilizers and chemical pesticides are considered far more sustainable. Sales of organic food rose 7.7% in 2010, up to $26.7 billion, and people are making those purchases for their consciences as much as their taste buds. Yet a new meta-analysis in Nature does the math and comes to a hard conclusion. Organic farming yields 25% fewer crops on average than conventional agriculture. More land is therefore needed to produce fewer crops, and that means that organic farming may not be as good for the planet as we think. In the Nature analysis, scientists from McGill University in Montreal and the University of Minnesota performed an analysis of 66 studies comparing conventional and organic methods across 34 different crop species, from fruits to grains to legumes. They found that organic farming delivered a lower yield for every type of crop, though the disparity varied widely. For rain-watered legume crops like beans or perennial crops like fruit trees, organic trailed conventional agriculture by just 5%. Yet for major cereal crops like corn or wheat, as well as most vegetables, all of which provide the bulk of the world's calories, conventional agriculture outperformed organics by more than 25%. The main difference here is nitrogen, the chemical key to plant growth. Conventional agriculture makes use of 171 million metric tons of synthetic fertilizer each year, and all that nitrogen enables much faster plant growth than the slower release of nitrogen from the compost or cover crops used in organic farming. When we talk about a green revolution, we really mean a nitrogen revolution, along with a lot of water. But not all the nitrogen used in conventional fertilizer ends up in crops. Much of it ends up running off the soil and into the oceans, creating vast polluted dead zones. We're already putting more nitrogen into the soil than the planet can stand over the long term, and conventional agriculture also depends heavily on chemical pesticides, which can have unintended side effects. What this means is that while conventional agriculture is more efficient, sometimes much more efficient than organic farming, there are trade-offs with each. So an ideal global agricultural system, in views of the study's authors, may borrow from the best of both systems, as Jonathan Foley from the University of Minnesota explained. The bottom line, today organic farming practices are probably best deployed in fruit and vegetable farms where growing nutrition, not just bulk calories, is the primary goal, but for delivering sheer calories, especially in our staple crops of wheat, rice, maize, soybeans, and so on, conventional farms have the advantage right now. Looking forward, I think we will need to deploy different kinds of practices, especially new mixed approaches that take the best of organic and conventional farming systems where they are best suited, geographically, economically, socially, etc. All right, and then we have a figure, and now we have our questions. All right, question 22, as used in line 14, simple most nearly means. Well, we're going to go to line 14, look at simple, and come up with our own answer first, so we're not swayed by other answer choices. So we see we have the only sustainable way to live is to get more out of less. Every environmentalist would agree. Right here, conventional industrial agriculture has become incredibly efficient on a simple land-to-food basis. Right here, simple basically means straightforward, right? Just looking at land-to-food basis solely, right? Only that. So straightforward land-to-food basis is what I'm guessing our correct answer will be. And we see we do have straightforward, right? We're not going to say an easy land-to-food basis because that's not describing it. Unadorned, also not describing it. And modest, also not describing it. We're just looking straightforward land-to-food basis. So A will be our correct answer there. All right, 23. 23. According to the passage, a significant attribute of conventional agriculture is its ability to what? Well, in the passage, we really talk about how conventional agriculture is unique in its ability to maximize the output of the cultivated land, right? We really talk about how, I'm guessing our next question might be evidence. It is not, okay. But when we talk about how on land-to-food basis, right, that conventional agriculture wins by more than 25% in some cases, right? So just maximizing that output of that cultivated land, not producing a wide variety of fruits and vegetables, that has nothing to do with that. Satisfying dietary needs of the world's population, that is only partly true, right? That's not the significant attribute of conventional agriculture, because organic agriculture could also do that, but in this case, what we're really talking about with conventional agriculture is maximizing that cultivated land. So we can't say it is C, because organic agriculture is also used for the dietary needs of the world's population. D, lessening the necessity of nitrogen in plant growth. We actually need more nitrogen in conventional agriculture, so we can get rid of D. All right, now we've got question 24. Which choice best reflects the perspective of environmentalists in line 27 on conventional agriculture? Well, let's go to line 27, come up with our own answer first. We got line 27. Of course, that's not how most environmentalists regard their agurula, a leafy green. They have embraced organic food as better for the environment and healthier and tastier than the stuff produced by agricultural corporations. All right, so that's telling us that these environmentalists believe that conventional agriculture is producing inferior fruits and vegetables and is also detrimental to the environment. So our answer for 24 there is going to be A, right? They believe that it's producing inferior fruits and vegetables to the organics and it's also detrimental. And our support for that, we actually read it when we were up there. That was 28 to 31. And I'll go ahead and show you why that's going to be our support. If we go back up, we look in 28 to 31, they have embraced organic food as better for the planet, okay, and also healthier and tastier. So they're really saying that it's better for the planet, so inferring that the standard agriculture or the modern one that's not organic is causing environmental damage and is also worse tasting, right? So We've got our answer there. Now we've got question 26. Which statement best expresses a relationship between organic farming and conventional farming that is presented in the passage? Well, we don't say that both are equally sustainable, so we can get rid of A. Now, as far as the other options, what we're looking at is B, both rely on artificial chemicals for pest control. No, organic does not rely on artificial chemicals. C, both use nitrogen for plant growth, but the nitrogen used in conventional farming comes from synthetic sources. That is accurate, right? That is an actual accurate relationship between organic farming and conventional farming that is stated in the passage. D, both create substantial amount of nitrogen runoff. We don't talk about nitrogen runoff, so we can get rid of D. 27, which choice provides the best evidence for the previous question? All right, so that one right there, that's going to be where we talk about the nitrogen use of each one, which if I remember correctly is towards the end. It's about middle to the end, right around, I believe, let's see, right here, around line 60, we have the main differences is nitrogen, the chemical key to plant growth, and then we start talking about conventional agriculture making use of 171 million tons of synthetic fertilizer, so I'm looking at about 61 to right about 65 here as my answer for my evidence. Got that in answer choice D, so D will be our answer there. All right, question 28. According to Foley, an ideal global agriculture system, what? It's line 80. So let's go to line 80, see what he's arguing. Okay, an ideal global agricultural system may borrow the best from both systems. Okay, so we're going to borrow from each. Let's go ahead and look down and see our answer choices here. We've got focuses primarily on yield percentages in global markets. No, considers multiple factors in the selection of farming techniques. Yes. C, weighs the economic interests of farmers against the needs of consumers. No. Puts the nutritional value produce first. No. We're really considering the multiple factors is what he's arguing for. He's saying that the ideal global agricultural system will consider both using conventional farming as well as organic based on the needs of each plant. So that multiple factors in farming techniques. As well as we also say towards the end here, where it's best suited geographically, economically, and socially for that farming system. So multiple factors there. All right, now we've got question 28 or 29. In line 88, shear most nearly means what? All right, well, let's go back to line 88 then, and let's find what shear most nearly means. Line 88. All right, but for delivering sheer calories, especially in our staple crops of wheat, rice, maize, and so on, conventional farms have the advantage right now. Okay, so in this case, we're just really, this is once again kind of looking at straightforward, just basic calories, just delivering or large amounts of calories, sheer calories, only calories, and pure calories. That's it right there. That's perfect. Right, not steep calories, they're not abrupt, and they're not transparent. Transparent would mean see-through, can't see through them. Abrupt, you can't have an abrupt calorie, and you can't have a steep calorie either. You can have a pure calorie though, and that would just be talking about only calories. So right there, 29, our answer is going to be D, and we can move on to question 30 now. So which statement is best supported by the information in figure 1? Well, let's go to figure 1 and take a quick look at it just before we start getting into the question. And let's just see what we've got. All right, so let's go to figure 1. Okay, we see that we have an upward trend here with whatever this is. We see we've got a circle to a square, then to a triangle, then to a circle. So we start with vegetables. Vegetables, their organic yield is a percentage of a conventional yield. So we see vegetables here, they grow a lot less when they're grown organically than when they're grown conventionally. Whereas we see with this circle here, this fruits are very close with organic and when they're conventional. So there's not much of a difference there, but there is a large difference in vegetables and in cereals and in these triangles a little bit, so oilseed crops. So if we go down and we look at our answer choices, let's take a look at what we've got. We've got the organic yield as a percentage of conventional yield is greater for vegetables than fruits. No, it's greater for fruits than vegetables. The organic yield as percentage of conventional yield is similar for cereals and all crops. Well, if we really think about this, it being similar for cereals and all crops, let's go look at our figure and also think back to our passage. So in our figure, we see that we've got all crops is this circle here, which is right here, and then we have cereals right here. We see that those are about the same, so yes, B will be correct. All crops and cereals will be about the same. So B will be our correct answer based on that graph. All right, now we've got which of the following claims is supported by figure 2. Let's go to figure 2 and take a quick look at it, see if we can find any trends or anything like that. All right, figure 2, I see a bit of a shape like this. As far as what that means, we've got soybeans have a high yield as a percentage of its conventional. We see that this wheat has very low, and then we have a triangle up here which is maize, has a high as well. So wheat is looking at our lowest yield. So we've got 32 or 31, which of the following claims is supported by figure 2 of the organically grown species represented? Soybeans have the lowest yield. No, I believe that they had one of the highest. Of the organic grown maize and barley represented are comparable in their yields to conventionally grown maize and barley. Well, let's go take a look at maize and barley. All right, we've got maize and barley. Maize and barley are going to be these two, and no, they are not close to their conventional grown, so that's going to be incorrect as well. So now we are on to 31. We are on to C for our option that we have to check. Of the organically grown species represented, tomatoes have the highest yield. I remember tomatoes do not, and I'll go show you that real quick. The highest yield, we see tomatoes is here. We have higher yields here, and we have a higher yield up there as well. So our answer by default is going to have to be D, and we can go ahead and show that that's correct anyways. The organically grown species represented have lower yields than their conventionally grown counterparts do. Yes, every single species up there has a lower yield than 100%, which means that the organically grown is yielding less than the conventionally grown. So that will take our answer for 31, and now we're on to passage 4. To start with passage 4, I'll read through it and then I'll get into the questions. This passage is adopted from John Bohannon, Why You Shouldn't Trust Internet Comments, copyright 2013 by American Association for the Advancement of Science. The wisdom of crowds has become a mantra of the internet age. Need to choose a new vacuum cleaner? Check out the reviews on online merchant Amazon. But a new study suggests that such online scores don't always reveal the best choice. A massive controlled experiment of web users finds that such ratings are highly susceptible to irrational herd behavior and that the herd can be manipulated. Sometimes the crowd really is wiser than you. The classic examples are guessing the weight of a bull or the number of gumballs in a jar. Your guess is probably going to be far from the mark, whereas the average number of people's choices is remarkably close to the true number. But what happens when the goal is to judge something less tangible, such as the quality or worth of a product? According to one theory, the wisdom of the crowd still holds. Measuring the aggregate of people's opinions produces a stable, reliable value. Skeptics, however, argue that people's opinions are easily swayed by those of others. So nudging a crowd early on by presenting contrary opinions, for example, exposing them to some very good or bad attitudes, will steer the crowd in a different direction. To test which hypothesis is true, you would need to manipulate huge numbers of people, exposing them to false information and determining how it affects their opinions. A team led by Sinan Aral, a network scientist at MIT in Cambridge, did exactly that. Aral has been secretly working with a popular website that aggregates news stories. The website allows users to make comments about news stories and vote each other's comments up or down. The vote tallies are visible as a number next to each comment, and the position of the comments is chronological. Stories on the site get an average of about 10 comments and about 3 votes per comment. It's a follow-up to his experiment using people's ratings of movies to measure how much individual people influence each other online. Answer: a lot. This time, he wanted to know how much the crowd influences the individual and whether it can be controlled from outside. For 5 months, every comment submitted by a user received an upvote positive, a downvote negative, or as a control, no vote at all. The team then observed how users rated these comments. The users generated more than 100,000 comments that were viewed more than 10 million times and rated more than 300,000 times by other users. At least when it comes to comments on news sites, the crowd is more herd-like than wise. Comments that received fake positive votes from the researchers were 32% more likely to receive more positive votes compared with a control, the team reports, and those comments were no more likely than the control to be downvoted by the next viewer who see them. By the end of the study, positively manipulated comments got an overall boost of about 25%. However, the same did not hold true for negative manipulation. The rating of comments that got a fake downvote were usually negated by an upvote by the next user to see them. Our experiment does not reveal the psychology behind people's decisions, Aral says, but an intuitive explanation is that people are more skeptical of negative social influence. They're more willing to go along with positive opinions from other people. Duncan Watts, a network scientist at Microsoft Research in New York City, agrees with that conclusion. But one question is whether positive herding bias is specific to this site or true in general, Wyatt says. He points out that the category of the news items in the experiment had a strong effect on how much people could be manipulated. I would have thought that business is pretty similar to economics, yet they find a much stronger effect, almost 50% stronger for the former than the latter. What explains this difference? If they're going to apply these findings to the real world, we'll need to know the answers. Will companies be able to boost their products by manipulating online ratings on a massive scale? That is easier said than done, Wyatt says. If people detect or learn that comments on a website are being manipulated, the herd may spook and leave entirely. All right, and then we have a figure. So now we can go ahead and get into our answer choices and our questions. So we have over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from a discussion of an experiment and its results to what? All right, well, we talk about our experiment and our results, that the crowd can be very manipulated, to what that means, right? What is the consideration of these questions that these results have given us, right? What does this mean as far as what companies can do? What does this mean as far as what consumers can do? right? This is really answering these big questions about what happens now with these reviews. So that's going to be our answer there for 32. We have A, an explanation of the practical applications of these results. We are not explaining the practical applications. In fact, we are considering the questions. We're not explaining the applications of them. C, are we analyzing the defects undermining the results? No, we are not analyzing the defects that undermine the results. In fact, we are saying these results are valid, so we can get rid of C. D, a conversation with a scientist who disputes the results. The scientist does not dispute the results. He only simply considers questions about them, right, about what they mean for society. 33, the author of the passage suggests that crowds may be more effective at what? Well, the author is really saying that crowds are really going to be more effective at arriving at accurate quantitative answers, such as the number of gumballs in a jar, than producing valid qualitative judgments, because these qualitative judgments are going to be swayed by other users' opinions, right? So C will be our correct answer there. I'm guessing we actually have an evidence question following that, and we do. All right, so as far as evidence for that, that's really where we're going to be looking for that gumball question, right? Or that gumball statement in the passage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go take a look and try to find that gumball statement, or that statement about quantitative. So right around here we have the gumball statement. We have the classic example, are guessing the weight of a bull or number of gumballs in a jar. Your guess is probably going to be far from the mark, whereas the average number of people's choices is markedly true to the true number. So that's lines 11 to 14. We're talking about how quantitative data people are better with the crowd. So that's going to be lines 11 to 14. All right, question 35. Which choice best supports the view of the skeptics in line 20? Let's go find that. Skeptics, however, argue that opinions are easily swayed by those of others, right? So nudging a crowd early on by presenting opinions, for example, exposing them to good or bad attributes will steer the crowd in a different direction. So what supports that the crowd can be swayed? Which choice supports that view of the skeptics that the crowd will be swayed? All right, well, if we think back, we can go back through and we can find where the crowd was being swayed at. We see that in, let me find it real quick. We've got, it is in, I believe, lines 20 to 21 maybe, where the crowd can be swayed. Or that's where we just were. Hang on, let me go back down to the question real quick. All right, so we've got which choice best supports the view of the skeptics in line 20 as far as the crowd being swayed. So that's going to be where we're talking about those reports on the comments. So right here, we talk about comments that received fake positive upvotes were 32% more likely to receive positive upvotes compared with a control. So that's 55 to about 59 or 58. Now, what's important about this is it's showing that these fake upvotes, they also resulted in more positive votes. So it's showing that they were swayed by these fake votes. So that's going to be our evidence there for showing how the audience can be swayed. That's 55 to 58. So our answer there is going to be A. All right, so now we've got question 36. Which action would best address a question Watts raises about the study? Well, one question that Watts raises about the study is really whether this is only for news websites or whether this is true across all websites, because certain news websites can be more susceptible to things like this because their audience may be more susceptible to bias, right? So he really questions, he talks about using multiple websites to collect the ratings, and that would address his question of whether it's specific to this website and specific to this type of news site, right? So that's really going to be our answer there. He doesn't, providing fewer fake positive comments isn't going to fix that. Neither will requiring users to register before voting, and neither will informing users that the voting data is being analyzed. All right, so that answers his question, because his question was whether it was only specific to that website. Next we have 37, as used in line 85, boost most nearly means what? Well, if we go back up to line 85, we will see we've got boost in line 85. Will companies be able to boost their products by manipulating online ratings on a massive scale? Okay, right here we're really talking about, will companies be able to promote their products, right? They're promoting their products to the top of the top rated list to improve their ratings on a massive scale, boost sales. So really promoting products is what they're saying by boosting products there. So go down here, and we see we do have promote there. Okay, they're not saying that they're going to increase products. If it said increase product sales, right, increase sales, that would be accurate, but it doesn't. Accelerate product, no. Protect product, no. Promote that product. Make it more appealing and more advertising there. So our answer for 37 there will be C. All right, now we've got question 38. As used in line 86, scale most nearly means what? Well, let's go to line 86 and let's get a figure on what scale is in context there. So I believe it said 86. We're looking for scale on a massive scale, okay? All right, when we're talking about on a massive scale, we're really talking about on a massive platform or something like that, right? So we are really looking at it being on a massive platform or on a massive something along those lines. Let's see what we have in our answer choices. Massive level, right? That's perfect right there. So 38, there would be A. We're looking at them promoting their products on a massive level through these false ratings, right? Not wage is way off topic, not interval, and not scheme. On a greater level, a greater scale would be what it most nearly means there. 39, in the figure, which category of news has an artificially upvoted mean score of 2.5? Well, let's go to our figure, an artificially mean up score. So mean up score is going to be right here, an artificially mean up score of 2.5. I see I have that right here. So that's going to be in politics, I do believe. Let's go ahead and go down. We've got politics is B for number 39. So 39, B. Politics had that mean up score of 2.5. All right, question 40. According to the figure, which category of news showed the smallest difference in mean score between artificially upvoted comments and control comments? So let me get a quick. All right, so what category shows smallest difference between artificially upvoted and control? Smallest difference between artificially upvoted and control. All right, artificially upvoted versus control. Which had the smallest mean, it asked? Well, let's find our smallest mean. So we've got control, artificially upvoted, artificially downvoted. The smallest mean is going to be, I believe the smallest mean is going to be in our, let me see here. Okay, smallest mean is right here, it looks like, in this general news category. Let me just go down and take a look at that question again real quick. We've got which category of news shows the smallest difference in mean score between artificially up. Okay, smallest difference, got it. All right, so we're looking for the smallest difference between our mean score and our control. So we're looking at the difference between this black dot and this white dot. It's the smallest here in general news. So general news will be our answer because we're asked for the smallest difference there. So that's going to be D, general news for number 40. All right, question 41. Data presented in the figure most directly supports which idea from the passage? Well, let's go take a look at it and just see what the figure shows us and then try to come up with our own answer real quick. What we see is we see a large variance between the control mean score and the artificially upvoted mean score. So we see large differences, but we also see large differences and we also see small differences in general news, right? In general news, economics, fun, information technology. So we see that it really varies with the type of news story is what we're seeing there. So we're looking for variance in the type of news story matters. So our answer for 41 then would be D, that the type of story being commented on has an impact on the degree to which people can be influenced, because there's large variance in those plot points is what we saw. We had variance that high, we had variance this low for general news. So we saw that the type of story matters. We didn't see that positive bias observed in users of the news may not apply to human behavior in other contexts because we had contexts other than news, right? We had things like, let's go back up, we can take a look at it. We had things like fun was a category, culture and society, things like that. B, the patterns observed in the experiment suggest people are suspicious of negative social influence. No, they don't. A, the mean score of artificially downvoted. We didn't see anything on artificially downvoted in our figure, so we can't say anything on that. It was only upvoted and then our control. All right, so now we are on passage 5. All right, let's get started with passage 5. This passage is adopted from Joshua 4, Moonwalking with Einstein, The Art and Science of Remembering Everything. Copyright 2011 by Joshua 4. In 2000, a neuroscientist at University College London named Eleanor Maguire wanted to find out what effect, if any, all that driving around the labyrinth streets of London might have on cabbies' brains. When she brought 16 taxi drivers into her lab and examined their brains in an MRI scanner, she found one surprising and important difference. The right posterior hippocampus, a part of the brain known to be involved in spatial navigation, was 7% larger than normal in the cabbies, a small but very significant difference. Maguire concluded that all of that wayfinding around London had physically altered the gross structure of their brains. The more years a cabbie had been on the road, the more pronounced the effect. The brain is a mutable organ capable within limits of reorganizing itself and readapting to new kinds of sensory input, a phenomenon known as neuroplasticity. It had long been thought that the adult brain was incapable of spawning new neurons, that while learning caused synapses to rearrange themselves and new links between brain cells to form, the brain's basic anatomical structure was more or less static. Maguire's study suggested the old inherited wisdom was simply not true. After her groundbreaking study of London cabbies, McGuire decided to turn her attention to mental athletes. She teamed with Elizabeth Valentine and John Wilding, authors of the academic monograph Superior Memory, to study 10 individuals who had finished near the top of the World Memory Championship. They wanted to find out if the memorizers' brains were like the London cabbies, structurally different from the rest of ours, or if they were somehow just better at making use of the memory abilities we all possess. The researchers put both the mental athletes and a group of matched control subjects into MRI scanners and asked them to memorize 3-digit numbers, black and white photographs of people's faces, and magnified images of snowflakes. While their brains were being scanned, McGuire and her team thought it was possible that they might discover anatomical differences in the brains of the memory champs. Evidence that their brains had somehow reorganized themselves in the process of doing all that intensive remembering. But when the researchers reviewed the imaging data, not a single significant structural difference turned up. The brains of the mental athletes appeared to be indistinguishable from those of the control subjects. What's more, on every single test of general cognitive ability, the mental athlete scores came back well within the normal range. The memory champs were smarter, and they didn't have special brains. But there was one telling difference between the brains of the mental athletes and the control subjects. When the researchers looked at which parts of the brain were lighting up when the mental athletes were memorizing, they found that they were activating entirely different circuitry. According to the functional MRIs, regions of the brain that were less active in the control subject seemed to be working in overdrive for the mental athletes. Surprisingly, when the mental athletes were learning new information, they were engaging several regions of the brain known to be involved in 2 specific tasks, visual memory and spatial navigation, including the same right posterior hippocampal region that the London cabbies had enlarged with all their daily wayfinding. At first glance, this wouldn't seem to make any sense. Why would mental athletes be conjuring images in their mind's eye when they were trying to learn 3-digit numbers? Why would they be navigating like London cabbies when they're supposed to be remembering the shapes of snowflakes? McGuire and her team asked the mental athletes to describe exactly what was going through their minds as they memorized. The mental athletes said they were consciously converting the information they were being asked to memorize into images and distributing those images along familiar spatial journeys. They weren't doing this automatically or because it was inborn talent they nurtured since childhood. Rather, the unexpected patterns of neural activity that McGuire's functional MRIs turned up were the result of training and practice. All right, now we can get into our questions. So according to the passage, McGuire's findings regarding taxi drivers are significant because what? Well, they're significant because they're calling into question that earlier consensus, right? Now, where is that earlier consensus? Well, we're asked for evidence in our next question, so we can go ahead and find that to prove our answer correct. So if we go through and we go back up and we look at the evidence, right, this earlier consensus we talk about is that it had long been thought that the adult brain was incapable of spawning new neurons, that while learning caused synapses to rearrange themselves and new links between brain cells to form, the brain's basic structure was more or less static. Right, this is calling that into question because now they're seeing that the brains of these taxi drivers, they're functioning differently, right? They're differing from this basic anatomical structure and that they have changed over time as a result of training and practice. So it's really calling that into question, and we saw that that was in lines 20 to 26. So that'll be our answer for our evidence to that question. Right, they're not demonstrating the validity of a new method, nor are they providing evidence for a popular viewpoint. We don't know if any viewpoint discussed was popular or not, nor are they challenging the authenticity of previous data. All right, question 44, as used in line 24, basic most nearly means what? Well, as usual, with a question where we are asked to go to a line and determine what a word means, that's what we're going to do. We're going to come up with our own answer first. So we have the brain's basic anatomical structure, but I'm going to need more context behind that. So we have while learning caused synapses to rearrange themselves and new links between brain cells to form, the brain's basic anatomical structure was more or less static. So here basic basically means fundamental or really just fundamental. So the brain's fundamental anatomical structure, right? It's basic anatomical structure, what it is from birth. So that's going to be fundamental, right? It's what it was from birth, right? Not its simple anatomical structure, but it's fundamental, what it was from birth before it changed as a result of training. We're looking for a word here that's showing that it did not change, the basic there is insinuating that it hasn't changed yet from training. So fundamental would be the best answer there. Necessary doesn't tell us that this is before it changed. Neither does simple. Initial sort of does, but not as much as fundamental. Fundamental is really talking about that state from birth before it results in these changes. So we have D, fundamental. All right, question 45. Which question was McGuire's study of mental athletes primarily intended to answer? Well, if we really think about what he was trying to answer by studying these mental athletes, it's really whether they have an abnormal brain structure or whether they're using their brain abnormally. So whether they are as a result of training, they're train their brains in a different way so that their brain's functioning differently, or whether they have a completely different structure of their brain. That was what he was really trying to answer there. And our next question might ask us for evidence. It does. So we can go back through and we can find our evidence to that one pretty easily. So what we're going to do is we're going to go look for where they talk about, let's see where it's at, where they talk about this right here. They wanted to find out if the memorizers' brains were, like the London cabbies, structurally different from the rest of ours, or if they were just making better use of those memory abilities that we all possess. So whether it's use or whether it's structural from when they were born. So whether it's a different structure or they're just using it differently. So that's going to be lines 33 to 37, it looks like. So our answer there will be B. Right, and that's supporting our answer of whether heightened memorization ability stems from brain structure or using the brain differently. All right, as used in line 39, matched most nearly means what? Well, let's go to line 39 and come up with what matched most nearly means. So the researchers put both the mental athletes and a group of matched control subjects into MRI scanners and asked them to memorize 3-digit numbers. So matched really here is meaning similar, right? They're similar control subjects, because that's what you need for control subjects, is you need similar control subjects to those you're using. So matched there means similar if we have that as an answer choice. We do not. So what we're looking at then is comparable, right? Similar or comparable. Comparable would also work. They can't be identical because they will have different genes or different genetics. We do not want them to be distinguishable. We want them to be as close as possible or as comparable as possible, and they're not competing either. So 47 there, our answer is going to be A. All right, question 48. The main purpose of the fifth paragraph in lines 57 to 65 is what? Well, let's go to our fifth paragraph, 67 to, hang on, 67 to what did it say? 67 to 57 to 65. Okay, 57 to 65, what is the purpose? All right, but there was one telling difference between the brains of mental athletes and the control subjects. When the researchers looked at which parts of the brain were lighting up when the mental athletes were memorizing, they found they were activating entirely different circuitry. According to the functional MRIs, regions of the brain that were less active in controls seemed to be working in overdrive for the mental athletes. So they're using different parts of their brain is what the big point there is. So the main purpose, as far as question 48, we're really talking about the main purpose being identifying that important finding of the different use of different parts of the brain. So the controls were using different parts of the brain than were the mental athletes is really what we're looking at there. We aren't speculating on the reason for McGuire's unexpected results there, nor are we relating the study of mental athletes to the study of taxi drivers. We're also not transitioning from any summary of findings. We are just identifying that important difference in the use of the areas of the brain. All right, question 49. According to the passage, when compared to mental athletes, the individuals in the control group in McGuire's second study did what? Well, what they were doing is they were exhibiting those different brain activity, right? I'm sorry, I cannot speak today. They exhibited different patterns of brain activity, right? They talk about how the individuals in the control group for the second study, different areas of their brain lighted up than the memorization masters, right? So we had differences in brain activity between the control group and those that were professional memorizers. So our answer there is going to be C. They didn't show less brain activity, they just showed different, demonstrating a wider range of cognitive ability. No, they demonstrated different areas, but not a wider range. D, displaying noticeably smaller hippocampal regions. We didn't talk specifically about that, so we can get rid of that as well. All right, question 50. The passage most strongly suggests that mental athletes are successful at memorization because they what? Well, really here they talk about how they're successful because they're exploiting parts of the brain, such as imagery, right? They memorize things as images, which normal people don't do, right? So they're exploiting parts of the brain that aren't normally used in routine memorization. And we saw that because the control group, their brains weren't lighting up like these people's were, like the professional memorizers were. All right, and then B, converting information they're trying to memorize into abstract symbols. Well, it didn't really say abstract symbols. It was actually specific, right? It was talking about images that could help them remember. C, organizing information into numerical lists. They didn't do that. They talked about them looking at that as images. Exercising their brains regularly through puzzles and other mental challenges. No. It had to do with differences in the pathways that they memorize things and things like that. 51, which choice provides the best evidence to our previous answer choice? So right here, that's going to be, let's go ahead and find it. So evidence that they are doing, okay, right here. They were engaging several known regions of the brain to be involved in specific tasks, visual memory, so that images I was talking about, as well as spatial navigation, including the same posterior hippocampal region that the London cabbies had enlarged in their daily wayfinding. So they're really using that visual memory and that spatial memory. All right, so that's going to be lines, let's see where that was. That's about 66 to about 73, just about there. Let's see if that's an option for our evidence. 66 to 73, 66 to 72, yep, that's good enough. We don't need that 73 there, that one works fine. So 51 there will be A, and then 52, the questions in lines 74 to 78 primarily serve to do what? Well, let's go take a look. We've got 74 to 78. Why would mental athletes, by conjuring images in their mind's eye when they were trying to remember to learn 3-digit numbers, why would they be navigating like London cabbies when they're supposed to be remembering the shapes of snowflakes? Well, that's really introducing then what we are going to talk about for our explanation, right? So we're introducing our explanation there is what we're really kind of doing there. So what I would say for 52 is I would say that we're not introducing and explaining that connection because we're not really explaining it, right? Between his two, especially not between his two studies. That's really the big part with D that makes D wrong. We're not connecting the two studies really at all from her earlier work, so we can get rid of D. C, implying his findings undermine earlier studies. We don't do that, but what we are doing is we are emphasizing and elaborating on an initially puzzling result of his study of mental athletes. So we're kind of emphasizing the fact that it doesn't necessarily at first glance make sense that their minds are operating like the London cabbies and using imagery and using spatial learning to study these 3 numbers in a row, right? That's kind of puzzling at first, and we're emphasizing that part by using those questions. We're not raising doubts about the reliability of any conclusions either there. So that's going to be B. We're really just emphasizing that it's puzzling, and we can go back and I can show you that as well. We've got that right. We say, why would mental athletes' images be conjuring images in their mind when they were trying to learn 3-digit numbers, right? That's puzzling at first because we're not really sure why they're navigating like London cabbies when they're supposed to be remembering shapes of snowflakes. So that's what really makes that one be emphasizing the puzzling nature of why they do that. So B will be our answer for 52. So thanks for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share. We also have a 90-day SAT preparation course that will be linked in the description. It's free. You should go watch that if you want help preparing for the SAT. I think it's very helpful. It's an hour a day for 90 days, taught by a 1590 SAT scorer. So I'd highly recommend that as well. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share, and have a good day.